Hey guys, welcome back to Wander Freely. So today is the day we're going to be working on the front of Aunt Gladdy. We've talked about this numerous times in the past. There's some delamination happening on the outside panels, so we're going to be taking that off today. We've got some aluminum panels we're going to be putting back in their place, and we want to walk you through the whole thing. So I'll show you a close-up of the bubbling, of the problem that we're having on the front, and then as we go through each step of the process, I'll kind of show you what we're hoping to do, and then we'll see how it actually goes. So come along for the ride. So here we are looking at the front of Aunt Gladdy, and as it's a little tough to tell this morning just because of the little bit of shade coming through, but you can see, especially along the bottom and going up the right hand side, this is the problem that we're having. This is that delamination that's been happening for quite a number of months now, and it's really just something that needs attention. What we're going to start by doing is taking out all of this existing weather stripping. You're seeing there's loads and loads of caulk and stuff on here that we're going to have to cut away. But this weather stripping comes out, we're going to expose the screws that hold this trim piece down, take all those screws out, and we're going to start by taking off this trim piece at the top, and then we'll work our way down the sides. I'm using just a little chisel, really, with a hammer to get underneath that stuff, and I'm really just focusing on where the screws are. So I'm going to expose those, take the screws out, see if I can just kind of get a flat bar underneath this and pull. This is a piece of trim that's holding everything down. So the idea is going to be to get this off. That'll release the top of the sheet. On the side here, we have this trim piece with screws, but the side piece has this weather stripping insert, which I think is actually going to help us because that pulls up easier. Those little trim bars came up pretty easy. Just got the flat bar underneath it and pried them up. And in some of the cases I cut the caulking in the sealant just because it was kind of pulling on the roof rubber, and I certainly didn't want to rip the roof rubber. So now you can see the top piece is completely loose. So the bottom seam came off real easy. That weather stripping pulled out, all the screws came right out, and then I just pried off the actual trim piece that the screws go through. So now you can see we've got a loose edge down here. This panel back here is supported on the sides, so although this edge is free, he's not really wanting to fall down, so that's a plus, because that would be a little bit of a pain. So before I take the sides off, I'm going to pop the little lights off on each side. Now we're ready to actually pull that panel off. I've noticed that in some areas, that substrate behind there, it's kind of like a cardboard really. They stapled that to the frame, so the actual Phylon piece might come off by itself in some places, and then I'll just pull that substrate off separately. I'm sure I'm going to have some staples to pull out as well. Okay, so the panel is off, and I gotta say, I'm kind of amazed at how good everything looks underneath. So here's the back of the panel, and sorry for the shade, but the water damage is bad enough. I'm pretty sure you can see that anyway. And I mean, this is still, it's moist even now. It's just, it can never dry out when it's all sealed in there. So it was time. You can see there at the bottom of the panel, water damage too. So I'm taking a closer look at the framing that we had behind the paneling, and it's all of these little 1x pieces going across. And I did notice there was one right here. It was this guy, and the end of him actually split pretty bad, which actually makes a lot of sense because that was over here and this was really it's just soft, you could push on it. So this thing had really moved, so I took him out. I'm going to replace him, and since I'm replacing him, he went across here. I'm actually going to do one up here and one down below just to give a little bit more framing and support to the aluminum paneling that I'm putting on. I'm going to do the same thing up top. I'm going to add basically a 2x2 piece. It's going to go all the way across. I'm going to add 2 of those just to kind of help support that paneling up on the top at the most curved portion of it. So to attach these 2x2s that I'm putting across, we're going to toe screw them into the wood framing that's up there. So you can see I've got one prepped here. We want this side to be facing out. That's what the aluminum's going to go over. So I've got one here, and then I'm going to stagger. I'm going to put one over here. It's a small piece of wood, so I don't have a whole lot of room for a whole lot of fasteners. But anyway, to toe screw them, one thing that I do is you drill a hole straight in, back it out, and then drill your hole at the angle. It's a nice and easy way to get those screws started so that you're not messing with it when you have the thing up in place. So something that I wanted to show you real quick. So these little 2x2s that go across, they're spanning about 8 feet. So you can imagine that they're pretty flimsy. I mean, that's the way the whole thing was built in the beginning. So it's fine, it's lightweight construction. But I actually had some little chunks of 2x4 left over from cutting these. So I'm putting them in right in the middle of the span behind here. They happen to be the perfect length. And there's just plywood back here. So they kind of just block in that gap. I'm just putting a couple screws into them. That'll help laterally give these guys a little bit of extra support. So we're getting ready to take some measurements now for the new panels that we have. I got them cut to size, but I oversized them just a little bit so that when we got everything off, we can see exactly where we want the panels to extend to. So the trim piece that's going to hold everything together comes down along here, and the screws for that are about 3/4 of an inch off the edge. So we want to make sure our panel gets well beyond that. So we're going to be measuring to the very outside face for our new panels to make sure we extend all the way out there. So here, just wanted to give you a little bit more information on the panels that we got. This is 040 aluminum sheet that I had. I got it in a 5-foot by 9-foot sheet, and I had them, we're going to be doing 2 sheets on this because I couldn't find a full 8-foot by 8-foot piece of aluminum. So we have 2 sheets, which means there's going to be 1 horizontal seam. Now to take care of that seam, I had them put an S-bend in the bottom of this one, and you can see here how it comes up, back, and then goes up. So on the nose, based on where the framing is, we're going to screw this bottom piece in, and then the next sheet's going to come over top of those screws right in there. It'll slip up in that groove, and then we'll caulk that. So that's how we're going to seam the 2 sheets, and then the perimeter of the panels will be screwed to the frame.
Missed the fact that I brought the football back.
My brother-in-law started to help, and of course he already broke something. Massive shears, busted.
I already owe Clint tools.
Yeah. We also have to drill through the holes for the lights. So Chris just took the measurements off of the piece that we took off, and now he's going to drill them through.
So we've got our first panel all measured, cut, and we're ready to put it on. So now we've got to look at the trim pieces that go along with this whole system. Now the seam between the 2 panels, we're just screwing that to the frame. The top seam where it meets the roof material, there's a little bit more to do there. So this is the flat trim that comes for sealing the joint between our front panel and the roof. You have this butyl tape, right, which goes underneath this trim. Then our panel, screws go down through all of that, through the rubber roof, into the roof sheathing. And then there's some other trim pieces that I'll get to later, but that's the top seam. On the sides, same idea, different piece of trim. That trim, it's got a 90-degree bend on it, so we'll screw the flat piece, I've got it upside down, we'll screw the flat piece on the front of Aunt Gladdy, and then this wraps around the side and catches the side panel. You've got the butyl tape and then our panel underneath, and then the screws go in the top.
Once we get this panel on,
Yep.
I might need to take a 5-minute break.
You bet.
Okay, so the consensus is to put a screw in the very middle first, and he has flathead screws, right, Chris?
Yep.
Because of the way the S-curve is going to come up into this sheet.
How are you looking?
Good, go.
Because why? Because you're going to add to it when you bend it up?
Yeah, we're going to stretch it out when we bend it up.
Okay. There you go. So now he's going to work his way to one side and then the other side. Okay, so here you can see the screws that they put in. Like I said, they started at the center and then worked their ways to the edges from the center. And now they're working on the top piece, putting the butyl tape up first.
So we're going to put the butyl tape on top of this panel, then we've got this trim piece that goes over top of the butyl tape, screw down through all of it.
That's all we got, bud. Alright. Go, go.
So the top piece is on, and now we're prepping the bottom piece. So we just measured, took about 4 measurements, working our way down to see what the width was, marking that out on this one. So we're just going to cut the one side off. On this one, from the top seam to the bottom seam, it's 57 inches, and the sheet's 60. So what we're going to do is we're just going to tuck the bottom of the sheet underneath the panel that's already there and screw everything up. So we don't have to cut the long dimension of this panel, which is a great savings. So one of the things that we had to take off were the lights that were on the top of the front panel. So I'm going to be putting those back in, and they came off real easy. This orange piece that's normally on there with a flathead screwdriver, you can just pop that off, and then there was 2 screws holding it onto the camper. So take those out, that releases it from the camper. And then the light fixture, which you can see up there sticking out, he feeds right through this hole, and then you just twist them and that kind of locks them in place. So it was real easy, so I'm going to go put that back on.
I got this side up in, but so we could theoretically with flat bar, we could try that open a little bit, get this up in there, and then once we get it all set in, come back over a bit, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Take 2.
So it's just impossible to get that in there. So actually, what are you guys going to do?
We're going to take a flat bar, we're going to pry open the joint a little bit, and then we're going to fix it later.
Okay. Flat bar, pry open, insert, and then fix it on the other side. So here we go.
Let's go. Yep. It's gonna trip, Jenny. Oh my God. They're all gonna ride quickly. Good. More. Go good. More. Right there. I'm up in for you. Danny, where'd you go?
That was like a glove.
I got it.
Sorry.
Alright, we gotta pull this thing way out. Oh.
Whoa.
Alright, we're gonna try to pull this out and then pull it. There you go, like that.
Okay, so Chris put one screw over here to hold it in place and one over here to hold it in place. And now they're going to work their way down the sides. Okay, so they started to put the butyl tape down, and then they're putting the trim right over top of that and adding the screws. They're starting at the top, obviously. And then when they get to that screw that they put in just to hold it in place, they're going to back that one out, then put the butyl tape down, the trim, and then put in the finished screw.
I got this, Jamie. Don't you worry about me. Fix her up.
That went well.
It's a new show.
It's a new show, Camper Fixer-Upper? Nice.
Fixer-upper.
I think we all need to eat dinner because it's starting to get a little...
Chip Gaines are going to be boys.
Oh, geez.
Good enough? All right, go.
One adjustment we had to make was at the bottom seam here. Because we tucked the new panel behind the existing lower panel, the location of the seam actually shifted by a couple inches, which you can see here where the existing screw holes are compared to where our new trim is. The new install will actually have 2 rows of screws. One row of screws being in the new trim, that will attach our new panel to the existing panel, and then we will put another row of screws through the existing screw holes. That'll attach both panels to the front nose framing, securing everything.
Yay, we did it!
Yay, it's over, we made it! So we wanted to share some finished product pictures with you here, and obviously you can tell we're not at the site where we did the main reno. We've actually been on the road since then, and we've put about 1,300 miles on her since doing the front panel replacement. So the trim here, you can see this is the side trim. This is that weather stripping piece that goes in. Then you can see I caulked on either side of the weather stripping. That you don't necessarily have to do. I like to do it though. And of course where the panel comes in and meets the trim, caulk that. I just use silicone for all of that. Also caulked along this edge, going the whole way up there. On the bottom, see, oh, here you go, same type of trim. Now this is where we had the 2 rows of screws. So this is our trim piece, this is the weather stripping screws underneath there. That attached this panel to this panel. And then this was where the old seam used to be. So we had to put screws in there because this actually attached both panels to the nose framing, which of course is very important. So put screws in there, and then I just used the non-self-leveling die-core product to caulk every single one of those screws. And I was really impressed with this stuff. This was the first time that I used it, but it really just forms a nice, solid, smooth seal and that's held up really well. Okay guys, and here we are up top. You can see this is where our existing membrane, trim, and panel. So you can see here's that self-leveling die-core product that we put down. We really put a lot of it down, but it just kind of settles into a nice smooth finish, fills all the gaps and the creases, and really just provides a nice sealed finish. So that was the full reno. Thanks so much for coming along for the ride.
Yeah, Aunt Gladdy looks a whole lot better.
Oh yeah.
Chris wrote all the details in a complete article on this process, step by step, materials and tool lists included on our website. You can see that by going, I'll put the link up above, I'll put it in the description below, and I'll put it at the end of the movie, whichever way that is. So thanks so much for watching.
Thanks guys, we'll see you next time.
Remove